The night after we buried my wife, my house was full of people but felt empty. Paper plates and plastic cups were stacked on the kitchen counter. Somebody's potato salad sat half covered with foil. In the living room, church folk spoke in soft voices, saying the same sentences people say when they do not know what else to offer. "She's in a better place, Brother Collins. God will give you strength. Call if you need anything." I nodded. I said thank you. I poured coffee into small styrofoam cups and passed them around like I was on duty instead of grieving. It was easier to move my hands than to sit still and feel what was going on in my chest. Denise's picture sat on the TV stand. That same smile she gave the nurse the night before she passed. I could not look at it for long. Marcus stood by the window with his arms folded tight across his chest. 32 years old, broad shoulders and a gray dress shirt, tie pulled loose. My son looked like a man who made decisions all day long, but right then he looked lost and angry at the same time. Aaliyah sat on the arm of the sofa, one hand on his elbow, as if she was afraid he might break if she let go. When the last group of church members started putting on their coats, Sister Evelyn came over and put a hand on my arm. "Henry, you were a good husband to that woman," she said. "You stood by her all the way to the end. Don't you doubt that. She meant well. She always does." But those words were like a match in a room already full of gas. Marcus turned his head so fast his tie swung. "A good husband," he said, louder than he had spoken all evening. The room went quiet. Coach stopped halfway up people's arms. Someone turned off the TV without being asked. Marcus stepped forward, eyes wet and sharp. "You signed off on hospice," he said to me. "You let them stop the treatments. You said it was time to let her rest. You did that. And now everybody wants to clap for you like you're some hero?" "Marcus," Aaliyah whispered. "Not now." He shook her hand off. "No. They need to hear it," he said, and then his voice dropped into a low, steady place that hurt more than the shouting. "You should have died instead of Mom." Nobody moved. Not one sound. Even the refrigerator seemed to go quiet. I felt the words land in my body like weight. Heavy, low, and sure. I did not grab my chest. I did not shout. I just took a slow breath and let it sit there. "All right," I said finally, my voice even. "I think it's time for everybody to head on home now." People shuffled, avoiding my eyes. Aaliyah started crying. Marcus stared at me like he was waiting for a fight. I did not give him one. Hours later, after the last car left and the house was dark again, I went to the top drawer of my bedroom dresser and reached under my folded shirts. My fingers found it right where I left it, a small, sealed red envelope with my son's name written on the front in my wife's handwriting. The envelope she handed me weeks before she died. The one she told me to give Marcus if he ever goes too far. I stood there in the dim room, holding that envelope, and realized my wife had heard our son long before I ever answered him. Before everything fell apart, before the hospital rooms and the machines and the arguments whispered in hallways, our life was simple. Not perfect, just simple in the way quiet families often are. The kind of life that doesn't make noise until something breaks. Most mornings started the same. I'd be up before the sun, heating water for coffee in that old dented kettle Denise refused to throw away. She said the newer one was too loud, too fast, ruined the ritual. She liked slow things. Quiet things. Said they matched my spirit. She'd shuffle into the kitchen wearing her robe with the faded blue flowers, pressing one hand to her lower back the way she'd done since her 40s. I'd already have her mug warmed. She hated pouring hot coffee into a cold cup, and she'd smile at me like I'd done something grand. "Morning, Henry," she'd say, soft and steady. "Morning, Neezy." We'd sit across from each other at that little round table, drinking in silence, listening to the city wake up outside. Cars starting, birds fussing near the gutter, a neighbor yelling at a dog. Nothing special. Just home. When the kids were young, they'd come stumbling in, Marcus always first, always hungry. He'd devour his eggs and toast with his eyes on his mother more than his plate. It was like he needed her reaction to every little thing, every grade, every joke, every scraped knee. He loved her with a kind of intensity that made me proud and uneasy at the same time. Even when he became a teenager with too big shoes and too big opinions, that attachment didn't fade. He'd talk to her about things he wouldn't even look at me for: school stress, fights with friends, dreams about leaving Atlanta and doing something big. Aaliyah was different. She'd watch everybody first, listen before she spoke. She'd sit beside me on the couch while Marcus sat by their mother. Even back then, positions in the living room said more than any argument could. But our house ran on Denise's warmth. She was the soft center of everything, the person the kids ran to first, the one who diffused problems before they became storms. It wasn't that they didn't love me. They just leaned on her like she was the only anchor they could see. The years went by fast, the way they do when you're working long shifts and saving for braces and keeping the lights on. I'd come home from the bus depot with grease on my hands, tired down to the bone, and she'd look up from the stove and say, "Sit down, Henry," like she could see straight through my muscles to the ache beneath. Looking back, I realized she was doing more heavy lifting than any of us knew. When I retired at 60, she insisted we keep our routines. "Idle hands make you fidgety," she told me. So I fixed things around the house, painted the fence, checked on neighbors. She worked fewer hours at the clinic but still moved like she was responsible for the whole city. The first sign something was wrong was small. She stopped humming in the mornings. No announcement, no dramatics, just silence where there used to be a tune. At first I thought she was tired, or maybe annoyed with me for tracking dirt into the kitchen again. But then she started rubbing her chest when she didn't think I was looking, and her walks around the block grew shorter. I asked if she wanted to go to the doctor. She said no, she just needed rest. Denise was stubborn in that gentle way women get when they've spent their whole lives solving problems before admitting a single one. Aaliyah was the first to say it out loud. "Daddy, Mama's losing weight." I had noticed too. The robe that used to hug her soft frame now hung like it was made for someone else. Her hands felt cooler at night. She slept more. Marcus was the last to see it. Or maybe he saw it and refused to believe it. Every visit from him turned into denial masked as optimism. "She just needs to eat better," he'd say. "You're worrying too much." Denise would pat his hand, smile, and let him believe whatever made him feel in control. She never wanted to scare her children. Eventually, she couldn't hide the symptoms anymore. Too many dizzy spells. Too many nights when she pressed a towel to her mouth after coughing. One morning, she almost fell getting out of bed. That was it for me. I drove her straight to the clinic. Tests. Then more tests. And then the look on the doctor's face, the kind that tells you the truth before the words do. They talked in circles about treatment options, slow progression, possible reactions. I listened. Denise squeezed my hand the whole time. Marcus demanded a second opinion. Aaliyah cried quietly in the corner. Life changed in an instant, and yet our routines tried to hold their shape. I took charge of appointments. I took notes. I followed the medication schedule to the minute. At night, when Denise couldn't sleep, we'd sit together on the couch, her head leaning on my shoulder as we watched reruns of old shows we'd seen 1,000 times. She would whisper things she didn't want the kids to hear, fears, memories, small regrets. She never blamed anyone. She never complained. And then, one evening at the hospital, after the kids had left and the machines beeped softly in the glow of the monitors, she said something that made my stomach drop. "Henry, promise me you won't fight with him when I'm gone." She didn't say Marcus's name, but she didn't have to. Before I could respond, she reached into the drawer beside her bed, pulled out a small red envelope, and placed it in my hand. "For a day when he goes too far," she said. "You'll know when." I stared at the envelope, my thumb brushing over the neat curves of her handwriting. Something about the weight of it felt final in a way nothing else had. We never spoke about it again. And for a while, things continued in that fragile, loving, careful way families do when they know time is running out but don't dare admit it. When Denise's condition shifted from she's tired to we need to monitor this closely, small cracks began to show in our family that none of us wanted to name. They weren't dramatic cracks, not the kind you can point at and say, there. That's where it broke. These were quiet, slow-spreading ones. Ones you only see in hindsight. Marcus visited often, but never for me. He'd walk into the hospital room with his laptop bag slung over his shoulder, still in his work clothes, smelling like expensive cologne. He'd kiss Denise on the forehead, straighten her blanket, fix her pillows, and sit on the edge of the bed like he was bracing her against the whole world. She'd smile at him in that soft way mothers do when their children come home, even when home is a hospital room with too much light and not enough air. But Marcus rarely looked at me. Not in a hateful way, more like I wasn't part of the equation. "How's she doing today?" he'd ask, eyes locked on her, ignoring the chart I had in my hand. "She had a little trouble breathing this morning." "Mom, why didn't you call me?" he'd interrupt. "I was here," I'd say. He'd nod once, not at me, but past me, the kind of nod people give out of politeness when they don't want to engage. Aaliyah, on the other hand, always hugged me first. Always asked how I was doing, like she could see something Marcus refused to look at. "Daddy's been here all day, Marcus," she said once, tired of the tension. Marcus didn't even turn his head. "I'm talking to Mom right now." Denise reached for my hand under the blanket, her fingers squeezing mine to keep me from reacting. That was the first small sign. Marcus acting like being Denise's son gave him seniority over being my son. But I let it go. A hospital room is no place for pride. The next clue came during a conversation about treatment options. The doctor explained the outcomes, the possible complications, the timelines. Denise listened calmly, asking questions in that clear, gentle voice she carried everywhere. She'd accepted her diagnosis long before any of us had, another quiet thing I missed at the time. When the doctor stepped out, I reached for the folder, trying to make sense of the numbers. Marcus snatched it up before I could open it. "We're not choosing hospice," he said. "Just so we're all clear." Aaliyah sat on the sofa, arms wrapped around herself. "Marcus," she said softly, "Mom's tired." "She's not giving up," Marcus shot back. "She just needs support." "Your mama's the strongest person here," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But she also deserves comfort." "You don't get to say that," Marcus snapped, eyes locked on me now, jaw tight. "You're ready to fold every time something gets hard." It wasn't the words that stung. It was the way he said you, like we weren't blood, like I was some man who wandered in off the street and happened to be standing near his mother. Denise closed her eyes and took a long breath, as if the argument weighed more than her illness. "Marcus, don't talk to your father like that," she whispered. He shook his head, jaw clenching, but he didn't apologize. He just left the room, folder in hand, like the rest of us couldn't be trusted with her care. That was the second sign, his need to control everything combined with his refusal to accept that Denise had her own voice, her own choices. He wanted to save her, and in his mind, anyone who didn't fight exactly the way he fought was part of the problem. The third sign came in a way I didn't expect, through Denise herself. One night, after Marcus had left and Aaliyah had gone home, I sat beside Denise holding her hand. The machines hummed in a slow, sad rhythm. Her breathing was light, shallow, the kind that made you listen for every rise of her chest. "Marcus talked to me today," she murmured, eyes half closed. "About what?" "You," she said. I waited. "He said you're not doing enough." Her voice didn't hold anger, just a tired resignation. "He thinks you're being too calm. Not asking the right questions. Not demanding the right treatments." I felt something inside me shift but not break. I'd never been the loud one. I'd never been the one who argued with doctors or called hospitals demanding updates. I'd always been steady. Present. That was the love I knew how to give. "I'm doing everything I can," I said quietly. "I know, Henry." She squeezed my hand. "I know exactly who you are." That sentence felt like a blessing and a farewell stitched together. Marcus is scared, she continued. He thinks if he fights hard enough, this won't be real. He doesn't know how to lose something. Not yet. I swallowed. He loves you, I said. I know, she whispered. But love shouldn't make him cruel to you. Cruel. That word sat between us like something she'd been saving. Then she looked at me with an expression I still think about when the house gets too quiet. There's a part of Marcus you've never seen, she said. A part he only shows me. And I tried. I tried to help him grow past it. But some things take longer than a mother has. That was when I realized whatever was in that red envelope, it wasn't simple. It wasn't some goodbye letter. It wasn't a blessing or a recipe card or a memory she wanted to pass down. It was something she didn't want to say out loud. Something she knew Marcus would not hear from anyone but her. The last clue came a week before she passed. I had stepped out to get coffee from the machine down the hall. When I came back, I heard Marcus's voice inside the room. You're not letting Dad make decisions for you, right? Denise didn't answer at first. Mom, Marcus pressed, you're not. Marcus, she said gently, your father has been here every day. He knows what I want. And what about what I want? He demanded. Baby, this isn't about you. Those quiet words sliced through the air. I opened the door slowly, not wanting to embarrass him. But he saw me, and his face tightened, not with guilt, but with irritation, like I was interrupting something that didn't concern me. Dad, he said, voice cold. We need to talk later. About what? About how you're handling all this, he said, gesturing at the machines. You're too calm. It's like you've already accepted. Denise cut him off with a look that said more than words ever could. Marcus, she said, enough. He swallowed his anger, kissed her forehead, and walked out past me without a single glance. That was the final sign. Marcus had already decided the narrative. And in that narrative, I was the villain because he couldn't bear the truth. His mother was slipping away no matter how hard he fought. Looking back, I see the clues. All of them. The distance. The sharpness. The way my son's grief was turning into a blade long before he ever pointed it at me. But back then, I told myself families bend under pressure. I told myself love makes people say strange things. I told myself Denise's illness was reshaping all of us, and that when she was gone, we would find our way back to each other. I told myself Marcus would see the truth one day. I just didn't know that day would come in the form of a red envelope with his name written in his mother's hand. Grief doesn't arrive like a thunderstorm. It slips into a house the same way cold creeps under a door, slow, quiet, and impossible to push back once it settles. By the time Denise took her last breath, the cold had already taken hold of our family. The days leading up to her passing were a blur of plastic chairs, uneven sleep, whispered prayers, and the steady beeping of machines marking time we were running out of. She drifted in and out of sleep more often. Her hands were cool, her voice faint, but whenever she saw me, she smiled the same tired smile she used when the kids had kept her up all night. Calm. Reassuring me even as her own body betrayed her. One night, I sat beside her bed rubbing her forearm while she slept. The hospital lights made everything look washed out and unreal. Aaliyah was curled up in the recliner by the window, knees pulled to her chest. Marcus had stepped out to make a call. Around 2 a.m., Denise stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, and she looked at me like she was waking from a long, shallow dream. Henry, she whispered. I leaned close. I'm here. She took a deep breath, slow and shaky. Then she whispered something I will hear until the day I leave this world. You've been good to me. I swallowed hard, nodding, unable to speak. Take care of the kids, she murmured. I will. And take care of Marcus. He's going to need help even if he can't say it. I nodded again, feeling her hand weaken slightly in mine. She looked past me to the window, as if seeing something I couldn't. Then she closed her eyes, and her breaths became soft and shallow. I sat there listening to every one of them, trying to memorize their sound. When the nurses came in at dawn, one of them placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Mr. Collins." I knew then. I knew before anyone said the words. Aaliyah woke to my voice calling her name gently. The moment she saw Denise's stillness, her face crumpled. She clung to me, crying into my chest, her whole body trembling. Marcus walked in minutes later. He stopped at the doorway, staring at the bed as if trying to make the moment rewind. "No," he whispered. "No, not yet. She was awake yesterday." He rushed to her side, grabbing her hand, speaking to her like he could coax her back. "Mom. Come on, Mom. It's me. I'm here now. Wake up." Aaliyah reached for him, but he jerked his arm away. "Don't," he snapped. "Don't do that. She's not gone. She just needs." His voice broke. The nurse tried to explain, tried to offer comfort, but Marcus shut her out. He pressed his forehead to Denise's hand and whispered over and over, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry. I should have been here." A guilt I didn't understand tightened in my chest. I wanted to tell him he had nothing to apologize for, but I wasn't sure he wanted to hear it. I stood there holding the back of Aaliyah's neck, grounding both of us. We stayed in that room for a long time, long enough for the sun to climb high enough to wash the walls in a pale, warm gold Denise would have liked. Eventually, they asked us to step out so they could prepare her body. I put my hand on Marcus's shoulder, trying to steady him. "Son," I said quietly, "let's go home." He shrugged me off like my touch burned him. "She wasn't supposed to die," he said, staring at the floor. "Not like this. Not now." His voice was hollow, with grief hollow, not anger hollow. But I recognized the shift. The same shift I'd seen in men who needed someone to blame more than they needed the truth. The funeral planning was heavy, but straightforward. Denise had left notes, typical of her, always thinking ahead. She wanted a service at our church, simple flowers, no long speeches, and her favorite gospel song played softly, not sung. She didn't want to burden anyone. I followed it all exactly. The day of the funeral, our church felt too small for all the people who came. Denise had touched a lot of lives, from neighbors to old patients to co-workers from the clinic. It should have made me feel comforted, but instead it made the hole she left feel even bigger. Marcus stayed by the casket the entire time before the service began, palms pressed to the polished wood, staring down at his reflection. Aaliyah stood close, watching him with a worried crease between her eyebrows. When it was time for the family to take their seats, I reached for Marcus's arm. "Come on, son." He pulled away. "She shouldn't be in there," he said, voice strained. "We didn't try everything." "We tried what she asked for," I said quietly. He shook his head. "No. You agreed with the doctors too fast." His words cut, but I didn't answer. Arguing at her funeral felt like desecrating the day she asked to be kept peaceful. Inside the sanctuary, Pastor Reggie spoke about Denise's kindness, her steady presence, the way she tended to people's hearts the way a gardener tends to soil, patient, consistent, gentle. Aaliyah cried quietly. Marcus stiffened beside her. When the service ended, people offered condolences in a long, slow wave. Some hugged me, some held my hands, some told stories about how Denise prayed for them or cooked for them or listened to them. Marcus stayed silent, withdrawing into that narrow, dark corner of grief where everything feels like someone else's fault. The repast at our house was supposed to be a time for comfort. Instead, it became the moment everything cracked open. People were scattered across the living room and kitchen, balancing plates on their knees, talking softly. A few of the women from church cleaned dishes without being asked, moving around the kitchen like they had lived there for years. I was standing by the dining table when Sister Evelyn approached me with her gentle, well-meaning smile. "Henry," she said softly, "you were a good husband to that woman. You stood by her through it all." She put a hand on my arm. "You were her rock." Those words were a gift, but they were also a spark in a room soaked with gasoline. Marcus looked up sharply from across the room. His eyes were red, glassy, full of something beyond grief. "A good husband," he said, voice sharp enough to slice the air. "You don't know what you're talking about." The room fell silent. Even the kids who were playing in the hallway froze. I felt everyone's eyes land on us. Aaliyah stood, moving toward him. "Marcus, don't." He stepped forward, voice growing cold. "You signed off on hospice," he said loudly. "You let the doctors stop the treatments. You said, it's time to let her rest. You did that." His words hit with the force of a fist, not because they were true, but because grief had rewritten the story in his mind. "Marcus," I said softly, "your mother." "Don't say her name," he cut in, pointing at me. "You didn't love her the way I loved her." Something in the room cracked. Not loudly, more like a slow split down the center of everything we'd built. Marcus looked around at the silent crowd, then back at me. His voice dropped into something low and unshakably certain. "You should have died instead of Mom." It was not shouted. It wasn't wild. It wasn't a son losing control. It was a verdict. A sentence passed with clarity. Aaliyah gasped. Someone in the kitchen cried out softly. Sister Evelyn covered her mouth. I felt the words land in my chest with a heaviness I can't explain. Not sharp. Not burning. Just heavy, like someone had set a cinder block on my ribs and told me to keep breathing under it. I did not defend myself. I did not shout. I did not walk out. I just nodded once. "All right," I said quietly. "I think it's time for everybody to start heading home." I didn't raise my voice. But everyone understood. People gathered their things quickly. Some hugged me before leaving. Others didn't know what to say, so they said nothing. Aaliyah refused to leave my side, eyes red and furious. Marcus didn't look at me again. He left without a word. Hours later, when the house was empty and the lights were dim, I sat alone at the dining table. The chair Denise always used sat pushed back slightly, like she'd just stepped away for a moment. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small red envelope. The one with Marcus's name written in the curves and loops of her handwriting. I laid it on the table in front of me. She had given me this for a day when Marcus would go too far. I stared at it for a long, long time, my hands folded, my breath steady. In that moment, I realized she had seen our son's breaking point long before I did. And she had left the truth behind for the day he needed it most. The morning after Marcus said those words, the house felt different. Denise's absence had already hollowed it out, but now something sharper lingered, the way the air feels after lightning strikes the ground. Quiet, but charged. Still, but dangerous if touched the wrong way. I woke before the sun, sat on the edge of the bed, and let my feet rest on the carpet Denise vacuumed every Saturday morning. Her slippers were still tucked under her side of the bed. Her pillow still held the faint shape of her head. Even the lotion she used after showers, lavender, still hung in the room. But the red envelope sat on my nightstand, exactly where I'd left it the night before. I picked it up. Turned it over in my hands. Traced my thumb along Marcus's name, written in Denise's gentle curves, the way she always wrote their children's names, even when they were grown. That envelope was heavier than paper. Heavier than grief. Heavier than the accusation Marcus had thrown at me in front of everyone. It wasn't revenge. It was responsibility. But responsibility doesn't feel clean when anger sits beside it. I didn't open it, it wasn't mine to read. But I weighed it in my hand and felt something I'd been avoiding for days, clarity. Denise had seen this moment coming. She knew Marcus's grief would turn into blame. She knew he carried a sharpness he hid behind success and certainty. She knew I'd stay quiet longer than I should. And she knew, maybe better than I did, that someday, silence would no longer be enough. I sat there until daylight crept in around the curtains. Around 8, the house phone rang. Hardly anybody calls the house phone anymore. It felt old-fashioned, like being pulled back into a time when Denise would answer every call no matter what she was doing. I let it ring twice before picking up. "Brother Henry?" Pastor Reggie's voice came through, calm and even. "Just checking on you." "I'm all right," I said. "That boy's hurting," he said gently. "But he was wrong to put that weight on you." I took a deep breath. "I know. Sometimes grief comes out sideways," he continued. "And Marcus, he's been holding himself together with tape and hope for a long time. It snapped yesterday." I leaned back in the chair. "He crossed the line." "He did," Pastor said. "But what matters is how you respond. Don't let pain make you forget who you are." I almost told him about the red envelope. Almost. But something held me back, like Denise had placed her hand on my shoulder again. "Thanks for checking on me," I said. "Anytime, Brother Henry." When I hung up, I felt a little steadier, but not settled. There are moments in a man's life when he realizes he can't stay still anymore. This was one. I didn't chase Marcus. Didn't call him. Didn't send messages asking him to apologize. I've never believed in dragging a grown man back to decency. But I also wasn't going to let his words become the last thing between us. So around noon, I sent one text message, simple, quiet, and unmistakably clear. "Come to the house tonight at 7. Your mother left something for you. Aaliyah too." That was it. No explanation. No emotion. No begging. Denise had taught me long ago that some truths need the right place, the right moment, and the right silence around them. Aaliyah replied within minutes. "I'll be there, Daddy." Marcus didn't reply at all. But I knew he read it. That afternoon, I prepared for the meeting without really preparing. I didn't rehearse a speech. Didn't decide on tone or timing. I just cleaned the dining table the way Denise used to, slow, deliberate, wiping the wood in long strokes. When I stepped back, the surface gleamed. I placed the red envelope in the center. Its color looked sharp against the dark wood, almost glowing in the afternoon light. A small, fragile thing that carried more truth than I could ever speak out loud. I sat down and waited. A little before 7, Aaliyah arrived. She didn't knock. She came in with her key, eyes soft, carrying groceries like she could fix grief with a casserole. "Daddy," she whispered, walking straight to me. I stood, hugged her tight. She smelled like the jasmine perfume Denise used to buy her for birthdays. "You okay?" she asked, searching my face. "I'm all right." She glanced at the envelope, then back at me. "What is that?" "Something your mama wrote," I said. "Meant for your brother." She pressed her lips together and nodded slowly. "He needs something. I just don't know what." The door knocked at exactly 7:12. Marcus never arrived early for anything. He stepped inside looking like he hadn't slept in 2 days, dark circles under his eyes, jaw tight, shoulders tense. He didn't remove his jacket. Didn't hug Aaliyah. Barely looked at me. "What is this about?" he asked, voice flat. I motioned to the table. "Have a seat." He hesitated but sat across from me. Aaliyah sat beside him. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The clock ticking on the wall suddenly felt too loud. Finally, I cleared my throat. "Your mama gave me something before she passed," I said. "She told me to give it to you when the time was right." Marcus frowned. "What is this supposed to be?" "A letter," I said simply. "Her words. Not mine." He looked at the envelope. His face softened for half a heartbeat, then hardened again. "Why would she write me a letter? She knew I was." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He stared at the envelope for a long moment. His fingers twitched. His chest rose and fell with slow, uneven breaths. Aaliyah touched his arm. "Marcus, just read it." He picked up the envelope. Turned it over. Saw his name written in Denise's handwriting. His jaw trembled. He slid his thumb under the seal and opened it. A single folded sheet rested inside. He unfolded it carefully, too carefully, like he already sensed the words would change something permanent. As he read, the room felt like it forgot how to breathe. His eyes moved slowly at first. Then faster. Then stopped. His face went from tight anger to confusion, to something raw and exposed, to something close to shame. Aaliyah watched him, tears filling her eyes without falling. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't try to control the moment. I had already said everything a man like me could say. The rest had to come from her. Marcus's hand shook as he lowered the letter to the table. His voice cracked on the first word. Dad. He swallowed hard. How long were you holding this? Since she gave it to me, I said. She asked me to wait for the right moment. He pressed the heels of his palms into his eyes, shoulders shaking as he fought for composure. She knew, he whispered. She knew how I talked to you. She knew what I said behind your back. She knew how angry I got. She knew all of it. He looked up at me, really looked, for the first time in a long time. And she still trusted you more than anyone. Aaliyah reached for his hand. This time, he let her hold it. He looked back down at the letter, voice breaking. She said you were the only steady love she had. She said I needed to stop being cruel to you. She said. His breath hitched. She said if I ever blamed you for her dying, I was lying to myself. The room was silent. Not empty silent. Heavy silent. Truth-filled silent. Marcus wiped his face, failing to stop the tears. He looked at me again, eyes red, voice soft and shaking. I'm sorry, he whispered. Dad. I'm so sorry. I nodded slowly, letting the apology land but not rush. Some hurts need space to settle before they can heal. And some truths need time to reshape a man. We sat there in that quiet room, the three of us, with Denise's words lying between us like a bridge she built before she left. There are moments in life when truth rearranges a room. Not loudly. Not violently. But in a way that shifts every breathing thing inside it. The night Marcus read Denise's letter, that shift didn't stay contained to my kitchen table. It followed him out of the house. It followed him into the car. It followed him into whatever darkness he sat in afterward, trying to make sense of the kind of honesty that leaves no place to hide. But truth has a way of moving, it spreads. And Denise's words, once spoken, didn't stay between just the three of us. They weren't meant to. 2 days after Marcus read the letter, Pastor Reggie called and asked if he could stop by. He didn't sound worried. He sounded expectant. Like he already knew something had broken open. He showed up in the late afternoon, wearing one of his old brown jackets that always smelled faintly like cedar and peppermint. He stepped inside, looked around the house, and nodded once, slow, thoughtful. She was here, he said quietly. I can feel her in this place. I didn't answer. There were no words for how empty and full the house felt at the same time. Pastor sat down across from me in the living room. He didn't bother with small talk. Marcus came to see me, he said. I felt my chest tighten, not with fear, but something close to anticipation. He was a mess, Pastor continued. A humbled mess. Said he needed counsel. Said he needed guidance. He paused. Said he'd wronged you. I didn't react, not outwardly. Years of quiet living teach you how to sit still even when your heart moves. What did he tell you? I asked. Not everything, Pastor said. But enough to understand this wasn't just about grief. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. That letter your wife wrote, whatever she told that boy, it pulled the roof off the anger he'd been hiding under. He wasn't wrong. Marcus had spent years building a story in his mind, that he was the protector, the favored child, the one holding everything together. Denise saw it. I saw it. But neither of us ever confronted it head-on. Marcus didn't want the truth, he wanted control. But Denise's letter didn't let him keep it. She said you were steady, Pastor said softly. Said you were the kind of man a woman trusts when she's scared. I closed my eyes briefly. The praise wasn't mine to take, it was hers to give. I was just the man she'd told it to. Marcus told me he repeated some things he shouldn't have, Pastor continued. Things he regrets now. Deeply. I nodded once. I know. And he said he wants to make it right, Pastor added. Not just with you. With the family. I let out a long breath. One step at a time. Pastor smiled a little. You're a patient man, Henry. Always have been. Patience was never something I bragged about, it was something I learned, the hard way, 1 year at a time. The public consequence didn't arrive through shouting or finger-pointing. It arrived through confession. A few days later, the church held a small gathering for members who wanted to share memories of Denise. Nothing formal, just fellowship, some music, a few stories. Denise had been a quiet supporter, the kind who prayed for people more than she ever preached to them. Folks wanted to honor that. I wasn't sure I wanted to go. The wound was still fresh. But Aaliyah insisted. You don't have to speak, she told me. Just be present. Marcus came on his own. No call. No warning. Just walked into the church basement wearing a dark sweater, hands in his pockets, looking younger than he ever had as an adult, like a little boy who'd finally stopped pretending he knew everything. When he saw me, he hesitated. Then he walked over. Dad, he said quietly. Can I sit with you? I nodded. We sat side by side as people shared stories about Denise, how she visited the sick, brought casseroles to new mothers, prayed with women whose husbands were drinking too much, helped students at the clinic with their applications, held strangers' hands when they cried. Every story felt like peeling back another layer of who she had been, a reminder of how deeply she'd lived her life, how many people she held up without ever needing the spotlight. Halfway through, Pastor Reggie asked if anyone else wanted to speak. Marcus shifted beside me. I want to say something. He stood up slowly, walked to the front of the room, and faced the crowd. His hands were shaking. His voice was low but steady. My mother was the best person I ever knew, he said. She taught me everything I know about compassion. But somewhere along the line, I stopped practicing what she taught. People listened closely. His vulnerability pulled the room in. I let my grief turn into pride, he said. And I took it out on the wrong person. His eyes met mine across the room. My father cared for her every day. Every appointment. Every decision. He was there. I wasn't. A few people gasped softly. Others lowered their heads. Marcus swallowed. I need to say this out loud. I blamed him for something he didn't do. And I'm sorry. He didn't cry. But his voice cracked just enough to show the truth inside the words. He stepped back from the front, shoulders trembling, and returned to his seat beside me. Nobody whispered. Nobody judged. Nobody comforted him with platitudes. The room held his confession the way good community does, steady, quiet, firm. After the gathering ended, people came up to me. Some hugging. Some nodding with respect. Some apologizing for not knowing the full story. Sister Evelyn, whose words had sparked the outburst days earlier, squeezed my hand tightly. Your wife's truth reached him, she said. It wasn't ours to deliver, but it got there. I nodded, and for the first time in days, the tightness in my chest loosened. That night, as we walked to the parking lot, Marcus stopped beside me. Dad, he said, voice low, I know apologizing in public doesn't fix everything. And I know saying sorry once doesn't repair years of how I acted. I looked at him, really looked, at the man he was finally trying to become. You don't have to fix everything at once, I said. Just don't repeat the same mistakes. He let out a shaky breath and nodded. I won't, he whispered. I promise. Aaliyah joined us, slipping her arm through mine, her eyes soft with relief. In that moment, I felt Denise's presence more strongly than I had since she passed, not in some supernatural way, but in the shift she'd orchestrated long before she left. Her words had done what grief couldn't. They'd brought truth into the open. They'd held our son accountable. They'd restored something fragile without forcing forgiveness. She had left justice wrapped in red paper. All I had done was deliver it. Healing doesn't arrive all at once. It doesn't come as a grand gesture or a dramatic turn. It shows up in small shifts, tiny choices a man makes when he's ready to stop living inside his pain. After the church gathering, our family didn't suddenly become perfect. Denise's absence left a space that couldn't be filled, and we all felt it differently. Aaliyah filled it with quiet service, stopping by the house every other day, checking my pantry, replacing the milk, leaving soup in the fridge even when I told her I didn't need all that. Marcus filled it with silence. Not the hard silence of anger, the soft silence of a man trying to reorder his life after learning he wasn't the person he believed himself to be. 3 days after the church gathering, he showed up on my porch without calling. I heard his car before I saw him. He sat in the driver's seat for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, breathing slow, deliberate breaths like a man preparing for something he had avoided for years. When he finally stepped out, he approached the porch steps like they were unfamiliar ground. "Dad," he said softly. "Come on in," I replied. He shook his head. I want to talk out here." I nodded and sat down on the porch bench Denise used to wipe down every spring. Marcus sat next to me, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. For a while, neither of us spoke. The neighborhood carried its usual sounds: kids riding bikes, a dog barking down the street, a lawnmower somewhere far off. Normal life. It felt both foreign and comforting. After a long breath, Marcus started. "I read Mom's letter again," he said. "Twice. Then again this morning." I didn't interrupt. "She saw me," he continued. "Really saw me. Not the version I show at work. Not the one I pretend to be." He swallowed hard. "She saw the parts one keep hidden. The parts one don't like to admit are there." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I think I blamed you all those years because it was easier than looking at myself." I listened. Letting him talk was the only thing required of me right then. "I always thought Mom needed me more," he said quietly. "Thought I was the one holding everything together. But at the hospital, she didn't reach for me the way she reached for you." His voice broke just a little. "Every time she was in pain, she asked for you. Not me. And I didn't know how to handle that. I felt useless." His admission landed with a truth that explained years of behavior. I kept my voice steady. "Your mother leaned on each of us differently. That wasn't a competition. It felt like one," he whispered. "Because I made it one." We sat with that for a moment. Marcus finally turned toward me. "I'm sorry for saying those words to you. I know an apology can't erase them. But I'll spend my life trying to make sure I never even come close to speaking like that again." I nodded. "Thank you." He wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his jacket. "I want to do better," he said. "Not just for you. For myself. I'm tired of being the man who hurts people he loves." And for the first time since Denise passed, I saw the boy he used to be. The boy who cried when he lost his first tooth. The boy who hid behind Denise's legs the first day of kindergarten. The boy who believed she could fix anything. I placed a hand on his shoulder, not as a father claiming authority, but as a man offering what he could. "You've taken the first step," I said. "Keep walking." He nodded, swallowing back emotion. We sat like that for a while, two men learning how to rebuild something without pretending it was never damaged. Over the next few weeks, the house grew a little quieter, but not empty. I spent mornings on the porch, drinking coffee from Denise's favorite mug. Not because I needed a reminder of her, but because it felt like honoring a tradition. Aaliyah visited often. Sometimes Marcus came too. Other times, he sent messages just to check in. Nothing dramatic. Nothing rushed. Just steady, slow rebuilding. Healing took the form of simple things. Marcus fixing a loose kitchen handle without being asked. Aaliyah planting new flowers in Denise's garden. Me learning to make the cornbread Denise used to bake on Sundays. Every act was small, but each one felt like a stitch, closing a wound we never wanted but had learned to accept. One evening, Marcus stopped by with a framed photograph, one taken years ago at a church picnic. Denise was laughing, her head thrown back, holding both kids close while I stood beside her with a plate of ribs in my hand. He handed it to me gently. "Mom would want this in the living room," he said. I nodded. She would. He hung it carefully, adjusting it until it was perfectly straight. We stood there staring at it, at her, understanding that she was the reason we were learning how to be better people. She had guided us in life. And she was guiding us still. Healing didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending the hurt never happened. It meant carrying the truth without letting it crush us. I kept Denise's red envelope tucked in my drawer, not as a weapon, but as a reminder of her wisdom. Her ability to see past our defenses. Her unwavering belief that the truth, when given at the right moment, could make a broken family whole again. I wasn't healed completely. Neither was Marcus. Neither was Aaliyah. But we were moving. Together. And that was enough. When I sit on my porch now, sipping coffee in the quiet moments before sunrise, I think about how life doesn't give us clean endings. It gives us choices, and consequences, and chances to do better than we did the day before. I think about Denise, the steadiness of her voice, the gentleness of her hands, the way she always seemed to see 10 steps ahead of the rest of us. Even when she was sick, even when she was tired, she was still guiding this family like only she could. The night Marcus opened her letter, something shifted in him, and in me. Not because her words were harsh, but because they were honest. And sometimes honesty is the only medicine strong enough to break a hard heart open. I'm not telling you our story to make myself look wise. I'm telling it because every family has a moment where someone breaks under the weight of grief or pride or fear. And when that happens, someone has to stand steady. Someone has to hold the line with dignity, even when the people they love forget how to speak with kindness. If you ever find yourself in the middle of a storm caused by someone else's pain, remember this. You don't have to shout to speak the truth. You don't have to fight to defend your worth. Sometimes the greatest justice you can offer is letting the truth rise on its own. Denise taught me that. And Marcus learned it the day he read her final words. Now I want to ask you, because stories like this don't end with me. If someone blamed you for something you didn't do, would you stay silent like I did, or would you speak your truth right away? Tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, if it touched something real in you, go on and subscribe. I've got more truth to share.